Hi, welcome back. In this video I'm going to show you how I make my own dehydrated meals for camping and backpacking. The first thing you're going to need is a dehydrator. Now you can get all different types of dehydrators, there's loads of them out there. The reason that I chose mine is that it has 6 stainless steel shelves and a fan that's situated to the rear of the unit so that it distributes the heat evenly across all the 6 shelves. The temperature is also adjustable, but there's no timer function on it, so I've just paired it with a mechanical timer. One of the main benefits of dehydrating your own meals is that if you have any specific dietary requirements, you can fully customize each meal to suit yourself. There's all sorts of recipes out there, you can buy any amount of books you like, but I'm going to show you a quick and easy way that I do my meals that just might make it that little bit less daunting for you. But just be warned, I'm not a chef, so follow at your own risk. The first thing I grab is a 24 centimeter steamer. I fill the base with water, bring it up to a boil and add in my chicken breasts. Then I pop in the veg into the other 2 tiers, put it all together and let it do its thing for about 45 minutes. After that I check the meat, make sure it's cooked all the way through, make sure it's hot, make sure there's no pink meat, and if I'm happy I carry on with the process. If I'm not happy I bang it back in for another 10 minutes and then check it again. So once I'm happy that all the food is ready to go, I'll take out the chicken and cut it up really fine. Don't have big chunks of meat because they're just not going to dehydrate well enough, and they certainly aren't going to rehydrate well. You'll end up with real chewy meat and nobody wants that. When all the meat is cut up, I add it into a big mixing bowl, and that's when I add in my sauce. I mix it around really well. Don't be afraid to add in a good bit of sauce because you will lose a bit in the dehydration process. Now the next step is the veg. You can separate out your veg if you like, it's completely up to yourself, but to keep things nice and easy I just bash it all into a nice big mixing bowl, mix it all up, make sure there's no chunks, and you know, that does the job. Now I know people like to measure out exactly what's in each portion, which is absolutely fine, I've done it myself. And for backpacking trips, when you want to have a certain amount of protein and you know, all these different things, your micronutrients, you might want to weigh it out. So just keep that in mind, maybe when you're putting it into the steamer, that you keep them separated from each other. This time I decided to use noodles, purely because I didn't have anything else. But you can use rice, you can use pasta. I'm sure there's other things out there that you can check out for yourself. To measure out the portion sizes, I use a 750ml pot. It's a really nice size for me, and I can use the measurements on the side of the pot to equally measure the amounts of food that I'm putting in. So you know, you can fill the chicken up to the 200ml mark, you can fill the veg up to the 400ml mark, and then you can fill the noodles up to the 600ml mark. That means that when you go out camping, you know that you can pour in your dehydrated meal and fill the water up to the 600ml mark, and that should be absolutely plenty of water to rehydrate that meal. So that's a really good way to measure out your portion sizes, and it gives you a good indication of how much water you're going to need. Before I went any further, I decided to weigh one of the meals. I got a weight of 597 grams including the pot, and what I'll do is I'll show you how much that same meal weighs after it's been dehydrated and how much it weighs when it's packed, so without the pot. So it's actually quite surprising. Before you dehydrate your meals, you do have the option to separate out your meat from your veg. Because your meat is going to take that bit longer, some people recommend that you dehydrate them separately, but it's completely up to yourself. I just bang it all in together and it works just fine. Before the meals can go into the dehydrator, you do need to cover the shelves with something, because if you don't, it's all just going to fall through the mesh. What you can do is you can buy sheets online, but I don't use that. All I do is I get some baking paper, I cut it to the shape of the shelf, and that's it. It does an absolutely perfect job, and it's reusable for, you know, as long as you think is hygienic. If your shelf has a hole in the middle, don't cover it with baking paper, because some of the dehydrators have the fans in the base of the unit and the hot air needs to blow up through the center. So just be aware of that. Don't cover up those holes, otherwise there'll be no airflow inside your dehydrator and I'd imagine it would overheat. So once you have that done, make sure to tip out your food onto the center of the shelf and spread it out evenly. You don't want any big lumps of food, you don't want any piles or anything like that. Don't overload it. If you feel like it's overloaded, take some food off. You want to make sure that you only put one portion onto each shelf. Once all the meals have been loaded up, I set the temperature to 65 degrees and leave it overnight for between 10 and 12 hours. After that time, make sure to closely inspect each shelf for any signs of moisture. If you see any signs of moisture, just bang it back in for another hour. If you pick up the pieces of dehydrated food and bend them, if they bend, there's still moisture inside, leave them in for another hour or so. If they break, they're dehydrated well enough, but do make sure that you look out for really fine droplets of water that could spoil your food prematurely. Once you're happy that the meals are fully dehydrated, it's very important that you allow them to cool down to room temperature just before you start bagging them up. The reason for that is if you put them into a plastic bag when they're still hot, it could condensate inside the bag, which will add moisture back into the food, and again they're going to spoil prematurely. The next step is to pack away the meals, but before I did that, I took the meal that I'd weighed previously, popped it back into the pot and weighed it again. This time I got a weight of 213 grams, which was 384 grams lighter than it was before I dehydrated it. So that is another really big benefit of dehydrating your meals, is that the weight of the food is massively reduced. For packaging, I use Ziploc bags. Before I pour my meal into the Ziploc bag, I pour it into a sandwich bag and I crunch it all up to get rid of all the sharp edges that are on the dehydrated food. The reason for that is I'm trying to stop the food piercing the Ziploc bag, which I want to have a nice airtight seal on. Now there will be little bits of dust on your baking paper. You want to make sure that you get all of that inside the bag, because that's your sauce, your flavour. Just make sure that it all goes inside the bag. You can reuse the sandwich bag and just repeat the process for each meal. Once I have all my meals bagged up, I just pop them into the fridge. They'd last for months in the fridge and they'll last for over a year in the freezer. So it's up to yourself how you store them. That's another big benefit for dehydrating meals, is that it really extends the shelf life of the food. There's a few different options to rehydrate your food. You can take your meal and pour it into your pot, fill the water level up to 600 ml or wherever it was when you made up your portions, pop it on your stove, bring it up to the boil and allow it to simmer. It will take about 20 minutes to rehydrate no matter what method you use. I actually just rehydrate my meal inside the bag. I boil up some water, pour it into the bag. I seal up the bag and pop it inside a cozy that I made. They're really easy to make. I made this one out of a foil camping mat. That just allows me to put the meal to one side and allow it to rehydrate. Whichever way you decide to rehydrate your food, make sure that you do give it a stir after 10 minutes, just to make sure that, you know, the food at the top of the bag is getting rehydrated as well as the rest of the food. Once I had the meal all packed up, I took the same meal that I had before, weighed it again, and it was 112 grams. So that's it, really all there is to it. I hope that you found this video useful. If you did, hit the like button, it really helped me out. And I'll see you in the next one. See ya.